campuses.
Can you speak to how time, manner, and place restrictions are being abused?
So most obviously, UC Berkeley did that with Ann Coulter, where they kept moving around her room and they kept saying they didn't have rooms available. They said the same thing to me a week ago. There was some public outcry, and now they're offering some rooms, which I hope that event goes forward. It's not rare. They do this a lot. A private university that did it was DePaul University. I was threatened with arrest if I set foot on campus. I actually showed up there, and a security guard told me, I asked him, if I move 6 inches forward, are you going to arrest me? And he said yes, and he had the sheriff of Cook County behind him. So this is, it's become a cover for ideological discrimination, because if Ta-Nehisi Coates wants to speak on these campuses, there's not going to be any problem. The administrators will make certain that time, place, and manner restrictions don't get in the way. And this is why I say, saying that the discretion of administrators is wonderful is all well and good, except that they very often are attempting to achieve a particular political end by using means that are normally legitimate. And that's definitely a dangerous thing. If you don't mind, I have a quick note on something that I think it was Mr. Lawrence was saying earlier about the damage that's done to students by various things that happen on campus, by threats of violence and this sort of thing. And obviously, everyone, I think, agrees that what happened to Taylor is unacceptable. But one of the things that I think should also be pointed out is we have a lot of other students in the crowd and administrators who spend an enormous amount of time pushing stuff like white privilege means that you must accept that you are subordinate in terms of your view because of identity. This also has some lasting damage with regard to First Amendment exercise and with regard to how people perceive the freedom of the country. And I understand that this is universally held belief among university educators that we have to accept the guilt of particular races or particular sexual orientations for discrimination that's happened in the past. But when you teach a bunch of 18 and 19-year-old people this, you shouldn't be surprised when, number one, they go into hiding with their viewpoint, or number two, they become frustrated. It's an absurdity to suggest that you can tell people that their viewpoints are out of line because of their identity. At the same time, you're telling other people that their viewpoints are completely in line because of their identity, and that any assault on their senses must be protected or prevented at any cost.
Well, I would just like to point out in closing that the group Young Americans for Liberty, that is handing out constitutions on campuses all across the country, has changed free speech restrictions on 25 campuses just by handing out this document, not by setting fires because they didn't like the speaker or throwing rocks through windows, but by handing out this constitution. And I am inspired that there are young people who are inspired by this document, and it should never be illegal to hand out this document.
Well said, Mr. Massey. Real quick, Ms. Strawson, is Mr. Shapiro right? Are most of the anti-speech activities going on campuses targeted towards conservatives and libertarians?
Certainly the well-publicized ones have been. And I can't speak for campuses across the country, but I go back to an opening point that I made, which was best summarized in the title of a book by Nat Hentoff.
But I just wanted to answer. I can't. We'll come back to that. But I just wanted to respond to Mr. Shapiro's point. I mean, that's my understanding as well, and I'll be.
Those are the well-publicized incidents, and it would be consistent with what surveys show about the prevailing beliefs on campus, that the majority of students are on the liberal end of the political spectrum, the majority of faculty members are on the liberal end of the spectrum, so they would be more likely to be offended by
Professor Raskin, you're smiling.
Speakers.
You find that shocking too, don't you?
Now, it's interesting, Mr. Shapiro, you talked about white privilege, and just this week I had a conversation with Rachel Lazar, who's done some work, a Jewish American woman who's done some work on this area, as well as having extensive conversations with Dr. Greg Parks of Wake Forest University, who's also talked quite a bit about critical race theory. And it's my understanding that white privilege is not telling individuals that they cannot speak, but it is a term for societal privilege that individuals have as a benefit of their white skin. And I don't think that, and I think universities would be remiss to then say that because you're white, you're not allowed to say anything that's critical of white people. I didn't know that white privilege actually went into that sphere. My understanding is it's just, and the issue is that white privilege makes people uncomfortable to talk about the societal privilege that they have.
Well, to me, what I say on campuses all the time is if you want to cite instances of racism that we can all find and fight together, that's something that I'm more than willing to stand next to you and fight, because that's obviously stuff that we should fight together. But when you just say that there is a white privilege out there in the ether and that by dint of birth your skin color generates for you an advantage, what you're really saying to people is that your view is less valuable because you have not experienced what I've experienced. And that is an identity argument, that's a character argument, that's not a rational political argument that can actually be taken on in any way. It's more of a cudgel and a club than it is an attempt to open a discussion.
Well, I think it's a demonstrable evidence that through society's demographics that being white has societal privileges that being black does not. But
we can talk about how that manifests, because that's
I'm
more
also
interesting
interested in what you just said now, is that you would stand next to anyone who has this. So, Mr. Shapiro, my question to you is, for Ms. Dunston, the tying the noose around the campus and writing messages that target African-American young students, would you consider that hate speech, and then would you stand next to her and fight for her?
As I say, this is the first I'm hearing about it, honestly, but...
Really?
Yeah. But from hearing about it, maybe because it's local. I mean, I'm from L.A. But in any case, I'm more than happy to stand alongside her and fight whatever group was responsible for this. Not only more than happy, I mean, you're talking about the alt-right. Again, I was the #1 target of anti-Semitic harassment from the alt-right last year. So I'm more than happy to do all that. And I think there's one more distinction that has to be made. When we talk about cases like Taylor's, they're horrific, and the administration is siding with Taylor. Okay, the administration is doing the right thing by Taylor, or trying to do the right thing by Taylor, as they should be. And I think that we need to make a distinction between cases where the administration is actively participating in the suppression of speech and cases in which the administration is trying to do the right thing in order to punish people for.
Then, we saw conservative voices exposing the blatant suppression of free speech on college campuses. They detailed how administrators use time, manner, and place restrictions to silence conservative speakers, while leftist activists run wild. Ben Shapiro laid out how universities push identity politics, silencing students who don't conform to their woke agenda. This hearing was a wake-up call. The left wants to rewrite our rights and control the conversation, but the American people are standing up. We're not backing down. The silent majority is silent no more. Stay tuned, like and subscribe, and let's keep fighting for our freedoms.